Welcome back. T and I are still soaking up the last few days of our vacation, but we've got one more special compilation for you this week. Stick around. You might just find something useful. Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher. Today's video is another throwback to our TikTok days, a mix of bite-sized voice training tips, practice prompts, and a few chaotic gems from the algorithmic trenches. Also, if you want to hit that like button, write a comment, click subscribe, smash that bell, or sacrifice someone to the bee god, it's always appreciated.
And bees.
Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
Now, if you're a real one that's been around since then, I hope you'll enjoy the nostalgia. And if you're new here, welcome. And I think you might find something useful. Let's get into it. If you're working to feminize your voice, one characteristic you've probably heard about is resonance. And the way that we control resonance is by raising the larynx, making the vocal tract smaller to create a much cuter sound, a much more feminine sound. But recently I had a student who was really struggling to get any upward movement with her larynx. So I tried this exercise with her and it had some success. So let's see if it works for you. Basically, I want you to say ee-ah, ee-ah. So when you say E and ah, you can feel your mouth shape changing. Now, if you hold that on one pitch, E-ah, E-ah, all you're doing is modifying resonance. So that's a really good start. We know you can modify the resonance of your voice. Now, let's do that same exercise, but we're going to do it now on A-ah, okay? Or rather, let's do it on A-ah, okay? So A-ah, and we can try it on A-ah. A-ah, A-ah. Okay, so we've managed to make some changes. Now let's try going from A to A without moving the mouth so much. So before we were relying on A-ah, a big mouth shape change. But can we get that change without moving the mouth? Let's try it. A-ah, 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 A-ah. So I don't know if you could tell, I got a little bit of movement from the larynx and a lot of movement from the tongue. So this can be a really good start to moving that larynx if you're not able to do it through other means. Give it a try and let me know in the comments if it worked for you. Is it possible for gender fluid, bigender, and gender flux people to train more than one speaking voice? The answer might surprise you. Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and I get this question way more than you might think. Many of my students have a gender expression that fluctuates from day to day, or they have dissociative identity disorder and their different alters have different voice goals, or they simply want to be able to choose when and how they express their gender vocally. Not only is it totally possible to have and maintain multiple voices, but this is something that we see regularly in bilingual people. Don't say bisexual, don't say bilingual. A 2017 meta-analysis of average pitch distribution among bilingual speakers found that overall, these studies show that in general, a bilingual speaker will show some variance in their average pitch depending on the language they are speaking. As a person who lives in one of the most multicultural cities in the world, Montreal, I see this in action every day. Les gens utilisent certaines qualités vocales lorsqu'ils parlent une langue y cambian fácilmente sus características vocales cuando cambian de idioma. This is great news for trans voice work because it means it's totally possible to code switch between your acquired voice and your target voice if necessary or desired. But it also means that if you speak multiple languages, you may need to practice your target voice in each language that you speak. If you like niche information at the intersection of socio-cultural linguistic analysis and trans voice work, follow for more. For my next couple of videos, I want to talk about the reasons why people resist starting a trans voice practice. So there's a little bit of a psychological hurdle that can impede the beginning of a practice, and there are very simple ways to get over that. So today I want to talk about the bounds of silliness. I often hear from students who are especially just starting out that a voice practice is very silly. And singers say this to me too. It is objectively a silly thing to practice, but it can be really hard if you have no experience being silly, or if being silly makes you feel like deep shame or embarrassment. It can be very challenging to get over that so that you can have productive practice. So I want to talk about a few safe ways to grow the bounds of silliness in your life. The first thing is to read books or plays out loud. So it's especially good if you can read books to children because it's kind of expected for you to make a silly voice. But even if you're alone, reading books out loud and trying to act it out a little bit can just be a way to feel more comfortable with being silly. So the next way is speaking through your pet. So if you have a cat or a dog or a fish or a lizard, if you make a silly voice for your pet, like many people do naturally when they're talking to their animal, this is like a really sweet and innocent way to increase the bounds of silliness in your life. And if you're feeling really spicy, you can maybe get some puppets. So puppets are another fun way to increase the bounds of silliness. You know, you're not just being silly, you have a puppet and it's being silly. So those are 3 ways you can increase the bounds of silliness in your life. Do you have any suggestions? Please leave them in the comments. If you're trying to masculinize your voice, an exercise you've probably come across is yawning on command. When we yawn, our larynx drops, creating more space in the vocal tract. This extra space creates a darker resonance, leading to a more masculine voice regardless of pitch. However, not everyone is able to yawn on command, or if they can, sometimes it engages other muscles in ways that make it hard to speak naturally, or it creates excess tension. If that's you, try tube breathing for voice masculinization. Take a 1/2-inch tube, this one is made out of paper, and put it in your mouth behind your teeth, and you're gonna gently close your lips around it, like that. Now inhale through the tube. You should get a more relaxed drop in the larynx. Then try imitating this sensation without the tube. So 1, and then again without the tube. Over time, you can transition into speech, resetting your larynx position with each inhalation. In the comments, let me know how many times I made you yawn while watching this TikTok. What does a chicken have to do with voice feminization? Stick around to find out. Alexis commented on my nasality test video, what do lightening exercises look like? So voice lightening exercises are any exercise that allow for gentle closure of the vocal folds, which helps to reduce the thicker, buzzier sound that can occur in vocal folds that have been exposed to testosterone. There are a lot of different voice lightening exercises, but one of my favorites is the chicken neck exercise. The beauty of this exercise is that it mechanically compresses and elongates the vocal folds, meaning that you don't have to do a lot of work in order to get the result. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna start by pulling your chin back so that you squish your vocal folds. And you can already hear the effect that that has on my voice. It's a very, very thick sound. Now, with your chest remaining stationary, you're gonna push your head forward. So this is why it's called the chicken neck exercise. We're doing this like chicken neck action. So you're starting here, and then with that sound continuing, you're gonna push your neck forward, which will elongate the vocal folds. So listen to the difference that it makes. And you get a lighter sound. Now, this isn't gonna automatically lighten your voice, but what it can do is teach you what it feels like to have your vocal folds coming together in a lighter way. So let's try it again. And once you get that sensation, you can try and return to the neutral position and maintain that lighter sound. So let's try that. And then I'm gonna try and maintain this lighter sound that I can feel. And that is the voice lightening exercise, the chicken neck. If you like this, I have a whole vocal weight toolbox in my module on vocal weight in my course, Mindful Voice Feminization. Should I release individual modules as like smaller, cheaper offerings? Let me know in the comments, and I hope this helped you answer the question. This commenter says, I find it so interesting, the idea of a voice type outside of the binary. I would like to hear an example because it's completely new to me. Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and for the last few weeks, I've been talking about my upcoming non-binary speaking voice course, Mix and Match, Designing Your Non-Binary Voice. I mentioned that some non-binary people may have voice goals that are unconnected to the gender binary or have a more unusual sound. But what do I mean by this? The characteristics that we'll be looking at in detail in this 7-week course are pitch, resonance, weight, and sentence contour. In most dialects of English and when using an average speaking volume, voices that are perceived as feminine tend to have a higher pitch, a brighter resonance, a lighter weight, and a wider contour. By contrast, voices that are perceived as masculine tend to have a lower pitch, a darker resonance, a heavier vocal weight, and a more shallow sentence contour. Caveat, this is a gross oversimplification. Not all voices perceived as feminine or masculine will have this layout of characteristics, and most people have multiple voices with which they speak that can be expressed in a variety of ways, so I'm just speaking in general. Please be nice to me. So, with that caveat out of the way, if you want to create a voice that is unconnected to the gender binary or is a little less usual, you can take these characteristics and combine them in unusual ways, or you can take them to extremes. So, for example, you could have a voice that has a higher pitch, a darker resonance, a lighter vocal weight, and a more shallow contour. So it would sound something like this. Totally fine, you can use this. It's a little less usual, but completely healthful. So that is just one example of a less usual way that you can combine these vocal characteristics. But let me know in the comments how you would like to see these characteristics combined. How come at the start of any voice practice, it often feels like you're getting worse? I'm Renee, I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and after years of teaching hundreds of trans voice students, over and over again, I've seen this effect in action. I see a predictable decrease in confidence as my students actually increase their abilities. I believe this happens because your ability to hear and differentiate characteristics of the voice like resonance, pitch, and vocal weight increases at a faster rate than your ability to control those qualities. In other words, your ear training progresses faster than your voice training. The result is that you feel like you're getting worse because you're suddenly able to hear things in your voice that you couldn't hear before. So keep this in mind. At the start of your practice, it's normal for confidence to decrease as your abilities increase. So if you feel like you're getting worse, you can rest assured that you're probably actually getting better. And remember that soon you'll be on the other side and your confidence will start to grow again. If you want to learn more practice tips and get your hands on some free trans voice resources, head over to the link in my bio, follow me for more, and I hope this helps. Would you believe me if I told you that you could work on feminizing or masculinizing your voice in complete silence? This commenter says, I share a room with my brother and I barely get any opportunity to practice. If your space is not ideal for practicing because you're sharing with someone or you're not out or you have to be quiet, then you might be able to take advantage of something called mental practice. Mental practice, also known as motor imagery, is where you visualize your practice in silence in your head. People use mental practice to improve their skills across a lot of disciplines like sports, dance, music, medicine, and more. For example, a surgeon could mentally walk through all the steps of a surgery, or a dancer could visualize all the steps of a choreography. Mental practice in trans voice work has the added benefit of helping you to develop your ability to audiate. Audiation is the ability to imagine sounds clearly in your head. It's like the sound equivalent of visualization. This may seem challenging at first, but it's a skill that can be developed like anything. In fact, you could probably audiate a trending TikTok audio without any difficulty right now.
Berries and cream, berries and cream. I'm a little lad who loves berries and cream.
So the next time you're stuck somewhere and you can't practice, try visualizing the steps needed to practice and audiating the results. Let me know in the comments if you've ever tried mental practice before, and I hope this helps. You've heard it a million times. Resonance is the quality that you have to master if you want to alter the perceived gender of your voice. But what if you just can't tell pitch apart from resonance? Well, I have just the exercise for you. Talk like a robot. Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and having trouble differentiating pitch from resonance is a very common problem. Pitch is created by the vibrations of your vocal folds. So if you make any kind of sound and put your hand right here, you can feel the vibration of those folds. Ah. But resonance is controlled by the size and shape of your vocal tract, which filters pitch, making it sound very bright or very dark. Now, one of the reasons that resonance is so effective at altering the perceived gender of the voice is that our ear tends to hear bright and dark as high and low, but this is also what makes it hard to practice. So how do we work on resonance only? When you speak on one pitch and maintain that pitch either by listening or by speaking into a tuner, you know that any changes to that sound are not coming from raising or lowering the pitch. So try speaking like a robot and creating a wide vocal tract to make a darker resonance, or try speaking like a robot and creating a smaller vocal tract to create a brighter resonance. Let me know in the comments if this exercise worked for you, and I hope this helped. He estado aprendiendo español durante los últimos 4 años y quiero compartir 5 cosas que aprendí como estudiante de idiomas que te ayudarán en tu práctica de voz trans. Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and yes, I've been learning Spanish for about the last 4 years, kind of off and on. I started when I was 32 years old, and before that, I never had an aptitude for language learning. I always thought I was just one of those people who could not learn a language as an adult. However, through challenging this perception of myself and sticking on my Spanish language learning journey through the ups and downs, I've picked up a few pieces of advice that I think are extremely transferable to a trans voice practice. The first is to read out loud to yourself often. So this is just a super practical piece of advice. Sometimes what we're trying to do is just learn how to create shapes that we've never created before. So as an English speaker learning Spanish, I had some trouble with rolling my R's. So I would just sit down to practice reading, and before I would read, I would go and then stuff that was really hard for me to say before, like aeropuerto, aeropuerto. Now I don't really have much trouble with it, although I still struggle with alrededor, alrededor. But even to this day, like 4 years into my journey, I still read out loud to myself almost every day. The second piece of advice is to identify your weaknesses and face them head on. So in my learning journey, I grew very quickly in comprehension. So I was able to read Spanish and I was able to understand by listening to podcasts and to TV shows, but speaking was a very challenging thing for me. So this is very common among language learners. So what I had to do was take private lessons. So I had never taken private lessons before. Most of my language learning was done sort of ad hoc in my own way, sort of self-learning style. But when it came to speaking, I could not do that one on my own. So I had to take conversation lessons. And I really only was able to learn to speak out loud in the last like 5 or 6 months. And it's been really cool. It's been a really cool change. Number 3 is to diversify your practice. So I'm the kind of person who gets pretty bored if I have to do the same thing over and over again. Duolingo, for instance, did not work for me. What I needed was a big mix of different things that I could do. So sometimes I would use flashcards. Sometimes I would listen to language learning podcasts where they were specifically telling me about how to learn Spanish. But sometimes I'd listen to podcasts about things that I just found interesting. Or I watched TV, or I would write in my journal, or I would record voice memos for myself, or I would take lessons, or I would go buy books at the Spanish language bookstore. I was doing a whole bunch of different things. And this is how I kept my practice interesting. And a trans voice practice is no different. There's so many different things you can do. So try to find ways to make it interesting for you so that you can keep doing it in the long term. Number 4 is don't be afraid to sound ridiculous or make mistakes. Now, I am one of those people, I'm not like a perfectionist, but I really don't like to sound stupid. I don't like to feel like people are judging me. And I tell my students all the time, people's judgment does not matter. And it doesn't. But this was something I had to face head on. So I had to become comfortable with sounding foolish. And what I reminded myself as a language learner was if you have an accent, like an Anglophone accent when you're speaking Spanish, it means it's not your first language. It means you're learning something new. So that was really important. And then the more I just reminded myself, I'm baby. I'm literally baby here. I have the language aptitude of a 4 or 5-year-old. Then it made me a little bit less worried about sounding like baby. And that actually weirdly helped me move forward in my ability to speak out loud. And number 5 is the importance of immersion. So a lot of my trans voice students want to wait until their voice is exactly ready to bring it into the world. And a lot of language learners feel the same way. But it's really important to put yourself out there before you're ready so that you're listening all the time, you're immersing yourself in the language. And even before I came to Mexico City, I was like simulating immersion by only listening to podcasts and reading books in Spanish and only listening to music in Spanish and doing my best to speak to myself in Spanish. But now that I'm here, I obviously have an even more immersive environment. So this is what you need to do in trans voice work as well. Just use your voice, and through the using, you will gain all the skills that you need. So those are the tips that I've picked up from learning Spanish that I think are extremely transferable to a trans voice practice. And I don't think I'm going to stop with just this language, because on top of these tips, I feel like learning a new language, and specifically the pronunciation of a new language, has made me a better gender-affirming voice teacher. I've learned so much about how gender is expressed in different languages and across other cultures, and I've learned how to make vocal sounds that I couldn't before. What language do you think I should take on next? Let me know in the comments, and I hope this helped. This commenter says, I'm having a problem with my resonance in that I sound like Lumpy Space Princess when I go low. Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a gender-affirming voice teacher, and I have to admit that this comment made me laugh because Lumpy Space Princess has such a specific sound that it's really easy for me to identify what the issue is here. In case you're not familiar with the voice of LSP, here are a few examples.
My name is Duchess Gummy Buns. Hey! I said look off, Mom! Princess Bubblegum's in my seat.
This is hard for me, too. I mean, I used to eat chili cheese fries with Brad, so there's gonna be a lot of romantic tension on this ride.
So this commenter is experiencing the LSP-ification of their voice when they try and drop the larynx, creating a larger vocal tract and a darker resonance. However, I have heard a similar complaint from people trying to raise the larynx, creating a smaller vocal tract and a brighter resonance. But usually what people tell me is that they sound like Kermit the Frog.
Right over here, this is a picture of a happy face. You big dumb stupid rotten monster! Now we can talk about being sad.
So sad.
Although Kermit and LSP sound different, what they have in common is the position of the tongue, which is really far back in the mouth, and a sort of closed position of the back of the throat, creating like a stuffy or occluded sound. Oh my God. I didn't even get invited to the party. Kermit the Frog here. It's like LSP, this is not in the script. LSP kind of sounds like if Kermit the Frog had like a California girl accent. So why does this happen when we work on changing the shape of the vocal tract? Sometimes at the beginning of a practice, you may not be able to selectively engage the different muscles needed to modify your voice. So when this commenter tried to activate the muscle needed to lower the larynx, everything in the surrounding area likely activated as well. So the throat closes up and the tongue shoots back. And you end up with this, oh my God sound. To work on moving the larynx up or down without so much tongue and throat engagement, we're going to try the pencil trick. So take a pencil, rest it on your lower lip, and then stick your tongue out so that it's gently touching the pencil. Now, practice raising and lowering the larynx, never allowing the tongue to stop touching the pencil. So you can do this by yawning, you can do this by swallowing, anything that moves that larynx around. Your tongue is still going to move, but what you want to avoid is this shooting back of the tongue. So you don't want to do a yawn and then have this happen, right? So we're trying to keep the tongue out of the mouth. Once you've mastered this with the pencil, try doing it by keeping your tongue against your bottom teeth like this. So you can see my tongue is still not shooting back. Once you've mastered this step, then you're able to move on to vocalized exercises and speech. Follow along for more trans voice content, and I hope this helped.
And that's it for this week's Roundup. If you want more structured support in your voice training, be sure to check out my full-length videos here on the channel. And my step-by-step courses are always available at reneejochson.com. We'll be back next week with brand new content, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. That's all for today. I've been Renee, and I hope this helps.
Because you're channeling vacation energy.
I am. I need it. I need it.
You good to go?
Yep.
3, 2, wait for the car. Slow and loud. Great combination.
That's what they say about me.